and welcome to SharePoint Dev Weekly. It is 4th of February, and this time we have a visitor in the weekly call. Hey, I can't speak English.
No, you can. We actually know that already.
Yeah, that's true. Nothing new. So that's fair. Now, it is already February, which is insane, and we have 60 centimeters snow in Helsinki, but that's a separate discussion. Now, the visitor this week, Victor, can you do a quick intros? Who are you?
Sure.
What do you do?
Sure.
You have a really cool shirt. You can explain what's that all about.
Cool, yeah. I'm a former certified master in SharePoint, or probably still a SharePoint master, but that is in old technologies, on-premises stuff, you know. I'm Victor from Sweden. We have plenty of snow here as well. I'm work for Avanade as our innovation lead for Modern Workplace. Been in the SharePoint space since the Tahoe Polar times. So, but I was thinking about saying something weird there, but I don't do it. It's being recorded, right? So, but spend most of my time not actually writing production codes. It's more PowerPoint clicking these days, or PowerPoint
waving hands and explaining things.
Yeah, exactly. But that's my free time. I write some cool SharePoint code or Teams code or whatnot code. Anything that gets my juice flowing.
Absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
And on the team stuff, we're going to talk about the teams and SharePoint together today. And I think one of the things what we have to remember as a SharePoint developers is that we're not actually SharePoint developers. We're Microsoft 365 platform developers, and SharePoint is just one of the things which are available, right?
Unless you are on-prem.
Unless you are in on-prem, that's absolutely so. Or is somebody still in on-prem? No, of course
there are people who are on-premise.
Yes, and people keep on always telling, "Oh, you should know." But yes, we do. We know. We know. We know. So for this week, Waldek, what have you been up to for the last week related on SharePoint topics and dev topics?
SharePoint topics, well, so
Microsoft 365 platform topics.
Yes, kind of predictable. We had a new beta release of the Office 365 CLI. We added,
by the way, massive deja
sorry.
vu. Massive deja vu.
Yes. Oh, yeah, we had another release. Yes, we released a beta with 2 new commands for working with the site designs, where you can get the info about the site designs that have been applied to the sites, and then the scripts that have been run, and so forth. And we keep expanding on that. Earlier last week, we had new version release with some commands for Teams and Flow, so that's coming out too. I think currently, if I look at what's coming, I think it's going to be more Office 365 development, and I'm really still trying to ship the article that I have open on my machine for, I think, almost a month now, about using application insights in SPFX. It's like it's still like it's like I'm almost ready with that. Just need to finish it up and ship it.
And that's more around coming back on the CLI discussion. There was a good discussion in the Twitter, or quick discussion related on the performance difference between the PowerShell and CLI. And obviously, the conclusion was that CLI is more performant and BMP PowerShell is more capable, so to say, right? Why is CLI more performant? Obviously, I know the answer, but I'm just.
Also, I think, I mean, I didn't compare the two in detail, but the one thing I can imagine is that CLI is just pure REST calls. There is no wrappers, there is no objects, there is nothing. It's just a REST call towards the API. That's it.
Atomic operations.
PowerShell, you get objects, CSOM, you get like translate the command or commandlet to an operation, to an object, to a call, and then all the way back. So maybe that is the culprit. I don't know.
Well, that was my thinking on the email thread. Twitter thread related on that one. So because obviously BMP PowerShell, or the PowerShell in general, it has the execute queries and all of that stuff. It's CSOM based. It's not an operation like Victor said. So it's not a PUM towards the server. So what was the other thing where I was planning to ask you that you talked about? Oh, the app insights thing. So the app insights for SharePoint Framework Solution, that's a blueprint article, right? Which been a while on your table to actually get done. And basic idea is that we want to have a proper blueprint or a clarification how you can easily use Azure App Insights to store events and exceptions. So having kind of a end-to-end guidance on, hey, this is how you do that, because you should be doing that within every single SharePoint framework solution. Which is going into production. So, Victor, are you using App Insights?
Absolutely. I was just going to say that. I'm looking forward to reading your point of view on that. So we use App Insights heavily. We have that as a part of our internal accelerator when we build modern SharePoint solutions. We use that for our own intranet and those kind of things to measure everything from the traditional page views to every single click, essentially. How are they used in different web parts and whatnot? And actually, App Insights and the telemetry from that is one of the reasons that we built custom web parts for quite a few of our web parts. That there's an out-of-the-box one in SharePoint Online, but we want to measure what they do with those web parts.
Yeah. That's interesting, actually. Yeah, that's let me write something down.
So I mean, we're recording this, right? So you can just go back and
no.
So it's auto-translating that for you.
Yeah.
What we just recently did in our accelerator is that we wrapped our App Insights calls in the SharePoint Framework service. So it's easier to call into that one. So the instantiation and when you set up the key and everything, that is done once. And also so you don't get collisions with other instances using App Insights, etc.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. And there is one interesting thing that I learned the hard way. Like the other day, I was trying to debug my calls, and I couldn't get the results in App Insight. Like no matter what I did, they were just not coming in. I was like, "What is wrong?" Eventually, found out to be the case. At home, you're using the Raspberry Pi and Pi-hole.
Pi-hole, yeah.
Pi-hole does not allow App Insight through. It blocks them. So like no requests are coming through, basically.
So what is a Pi-hole for those who have not?
Pi-hole is a DNS-based blocker for ads. So when you go to a site and there's an ad, it has a blacklist of the domains. DNS says that it will not load, and you basically get a wide block on the page.
Yeah, and you plug it into your router then as a
to network. Yeah, and then you use it as DNS server.
Yeah. So it's forwarding the rest of the DNSs, but catches those.
Yeah, it speeds up the network significantly. Like you are surprised how many calls you get to different sites depending on what you browse. Like for example, if you go to things like New York Times or some other news, there's a lot of requests going on behind the scene that you either do see or don't see. But like the easiest way is just like how many empty gaps are there on a screen? These are all ads.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, and to be fair, there's a lot of HTTP requests happening in every single site, SharePoint Online being one of them. And on the telemetry context and in the telemetry discussion, it's actually interesting to see if you open up a SharePoint Online and F12, and then you see ARIA entries going on all the time. ARIA is our telemetry, and basically just stamping through what's actually happening. Because obviously telemetry is insanely important also for us to understand how people are using our software. So do we invest on this button, that button, that one, or where?
Exactly.
On the other hand, it's also kind of one of those things which we need to be careful as Microsoft, especially because the people always attacked on us. There was what was it? There was in Netherlands. There was somebody announcement. It's already in the autumn related on the Office client was tracking too much information. And that was mainly, and I'm almost 100% sure there was no harmed intention or nothing. It's mainly to understand how people are using the client. But then you need to figure out what's the right balance on how much information do you actually do. And then at some point, telemetry starts impacting the performance as well, which is interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And so two questions here. For you mentioned the GDPR and stuff like that. App Insights is quite good because you can configure and remove those kind of personal identity from the telemetry. You don't want that. So that's a good thing. But the second thing is to you, Vesa. Why don't you implement a similar solution how App Insights batches the telemetry instead of pinging the servers all the time as you do in SharePoint Online?
Yeah. It's a pity that we're using our internal ARIA system for the telemetry and not the App Insights. There are certain reasons behind and potentially legacy reasons and some of this stuff as well. But yeah, fair point. We should do proper patching on those as well because every now and then the console is getting too chatty and the network traffic is too chatty on SharePoint Online. Absolutely. Now, quickly on my side, so last week I was in Redmond. I dropped by at the office. What was interesting around that discussion, quickly spending 1 minute on this one. So there was a CO2 comparison that we had a chat with somebody. I was just saying that, well, my commutes are basically commutes are pretty long, which is true, like 7,500 kilometers. And then somebody said, well, it's an interesting CO2 impact of that, which is fair. Because the environmental impacts are pretty large. And then my statement was, well, if you drive the office every single morning for 1 hour and back, how's that comparing to the once a quarter flight to your office, which is my reality?
Well, but I mean, actually, living in Finland, you could take a canoe and paddle all the way to Redmond. Like, that would be really CO2 neutral.
Yeah, true.
Well, depending on what you eat along the road, right?
That's true. Yeah. But what was actually interesting, based on a quick calculation, if you drive to work every single day and drive back from the work, it's the same amount of CO2 when flying to Seattle and back once. So 1 year driving has the same amount of CO2. So I was like, wow. So
seriously?
Really flying is bad. Anyway, not an IT stuff. Interesting statistics. Now, what I was actually doing there, this was a nice relaxed week, just hanging on the office. So basically meetings and everything else. So we're blocking down our 1.8 release plan, 1.9 release plan. Locking down our release plan for provisioning service, the BMP provisioning service, and shown that a few times. And I know that Victor have plenty of input on that one when we get it out. Talked about that quite a few times already.
Application insights.
Well, we are using application insights there, but anyway.
Very good. Check.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting. The provisioning service is an interesting service because it's an open source, community-driven service which we push out for people to use, and then we still need to have the legal discussions and anything else, and making sure that the wording and everything is correct. So it's been an interesting journey on getting it down. Anyway. Now let's actually get back on the articles and the discussions on the screen. So let me jump to that screen. And the first thing what I wanted to actually start, and whenever I get to that screen shared, technology is so hard. Let me actually get back.
Slide.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Cool. So this is a one slide which I actually shared as part of the BMP graphics presentation, and then people started asking, why are you planning to rename SharePoint Framework? And the answer is because it's not about SharePoint Framework anymore, about SharePoint only anymore. Now, this is a slide. In this slide means that, well, we need to figure out a new name for SharePoint Framework sooner or later, because right now, yes, we have a SharePoint Framework, which is around the web parts and extensions in SharePoint. As part of the 1.8 release, we will be releasing the Microsoft Teams tab development support for SharePoint Framework, which I would say significantly simplifies development of Microsoft Teams tab. Wouldn't you agree on that, guys?
Yes. Absolutely.
Because I would say at least the number one thing the deployment and the permissions and hosting and everything else is just super simplifying versus the classic way of you need to get an Azure application, you need to do the configuration of permissions and craft permissions and everything else, and that gets messy. Now the final step on this journey is actually that we're looking into starting dev preview, then potentially in 1.9 around the Office settings built with SharePoint Framework. And this means then that we cannot really call it SharePoint Framework anymore, and we need to call it something else. In the same way as Office UI Fabric is changing its name, we need to change our name at some point. Your thoughts or kind of an input around Office settings development with SharePoint Framework and Teams? Is it a worthwhile of an idea to hunt for?
Absolutely, it's the same kind of concept that we have with Teams. It's an iframe in Office, so why not? It gives us the opportunity to build the same kind of web part or extensibility option and host it in 3 different areas, or reuse parts of that. We can create one React control and reuse it in many areas, or Angular control or whatever control you build, but reuse that. So and from an end user perspective, I'm not just thinking about the developer perspective, but from an end user perspective, if they get the same experience everywhere, it's a win-win, right? Then there are always scenarios when you will not use SharePoint Framework as or I would say there are scenarios where you don't want to host it in SharePoint. because all of these are based on that you host your application in SharePoint. There are scenarios when you do not want that.
What would be the scenario where you don't?
We have the simple example here. Assume that I'm building a mail component that can send mail. Then I don't want to build that in SharePoint Framework, because then I have to give those permissions to the graph. And you know what happens if we give that to all JavaScript in SharePoint. That's one of the examples. Another being you don't have users that don't have SharePoint license. That might be one thing. I don't know how you sort that out. Another thing might be we don't even need the stuff in SharePoint. It's our own solution we're using. We're building. It's an anonymous. You don't have to be authorized to get in. So there are cases where it doesn't really make sense, or you need a vast majority of your own APIs and server-side code and whatnot. Then of course it's not a good solution to do that. Then you can use other kind of Azure resources to do that. But this is the starting point in ANA, and would 80% of the cases are probably covered by using SharePoint Framework to do this kind of stuff.
And I think to address back to what you said about the first part about permissions for email to Google Graph, you can address that directly now. There is in beta, there's available the ability to have isolated permissions, right? So you could grant them only to your application and not to everything else. So that way you would be able to address that point, like granting that permission to everybody across the tenant.
Yes, exactly. You can do that. But you have the deployment scenarios as well when you are in ISV or you have an application and you want to put that in the store. You might have better control of it. Yeah.
Sure. And that's obviously, well, technically that's even debatable. And to be fair, it depends on what is the size of an ISV, and we will definitely support both of the scenarios because if you're a smaller ISV, it probably might make sense to have your assets package inside of the SVP-KT file. So you're then getting that deployed by deploying that to the app catalog in a tenant, and poof, then deployed from there and hosted automatically.
Well, yes and no. I mean, you can go around it two ways, right? Because like no matter your size, being the customer, like, are you okay with somebody pushing updates to your environment and basically having full access to your environment without you controlling that? Maybe you are not.
And that's the external CDN statement, because that would be the case. Now, if it's CDN, Office 365 hosted CDN, you control when that package is getting deployed and updated. But again,
you have the ability to review it first up front before doing the update.
Absolutely. Now, again, debatable, and there's multiple scenarios which are right or wrong. Actually, that reminded me, we did have quite a few meetings last week related on the store model for SharePoint Framework, which I can't disclose anything about. But we're getting there. We are absolutely getting there. So the intention is to enable SharePoint Framework solutions in the store, and then that be going to be the primary model for SharePoint, because, well, the adding model does exist, it will be supported, but we're not really looking into investing on that anymore. So
what I would like to see this XFX to be, it should essentially be an overarching deployment model for all kind of Microsoft 365 extensibility. Then there might be different kind of versions or shapes or forms of it inside. One being where SharePoint Framework is now, it's essentially an user and a UX extensibility framework. That's what it is. You extend the user interface. There might be other areas, such as, assume, if we're thinking ahead and wishing, and we could rub the bottle and hopefully get a genie out there and do everything for us. I would like to have something that I have my set of APIs and services. I have my applications with everything defined in there. So what permissions to the graph and other stuff you want, and have that as one single deployment model in the Microsoft admin console. Upload this, and then you have, just as we have extensions and web parts now, say this is a Teams tab, this is a bot, this is an Office add-in. So I'd like to see that package format and deployment format being the same. Then we have different variations underneath it, depending on what context you want to add your solution to.
Yep, and that's actually something what we are actually working on and looking into now. When will it be available? That's a separate discussion, but really kind of a consolidation of the whole platform, because it doesn't make any sense to have a different UI layers. It's like Office UI Fabric is now going to be whatever the new name is going to be, but it's around the Fluent UI, Microsoft Fluent experiences, and there's no point And there is already a really well-functioning Office UI Fabric team. So let's take advantage of that, which the community is already familiar and already using. And then let's bring the Microsoft Fluent UIs to that one. And then Visual Studio, Online or DevOps, Outlook, every single internal team and external team will benefit out of it. So in the same way, SharePoint Framework, it is a UI framework, like you said, and it's why wouldn't we use the same UI framework across the different other elements? To be fair, maybe SharePoint. Well, now I'm actually thinking, no, cancel. I'm not going to say anything else. No,
cut. We're going to edit this one.
Beep, 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 beep. Yeah, but yeah, so it's an interesting scenario, and let's see. There's obviously, whenever we are aligning across the organization, there's a lot of politics, unfortunately, behind all of this. I think that's one of the challenges which every single larger company is having, because every single organization and service wants to own their own thing, but I think there's room for everything in this, and making sure that our resources are being used efficiently. So let's use the right team owning the right capability. So like the bots will be absolutely owned by Microsoft Teams people, because that's the primary use case of the bots, and bots will be probably at some point in SharePoint as well. Why wouldn't they be? But it's not like SharePoint's going to introduce their own bot model, because that's just insane.
No, but that's the point of how, if you take a look at the Teams manifest, it just points to an endpoint or the bot ID. It's hosted somewhere else, but it's they have deployment models to point to a tab, to a bot, to extension, and whatnot. So that's what I would like to see, that like Microsoft 365 extensibility manifest, one common and deployment model for that, and just points to different kind of solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Makes sense. Now, for this one, for those who have time and interest, please let us know. Help us to prioritize this alignment between the projects. So this is really the surveys around Office add-in scenario. So this takes like 3 to 5 minutes to answer. And it's around, would you be interested on more writing Office add-ins if we would give you the capability of creating Office add-ins using the SharePoint Framework platform? Now, to be fair, we're asking this question within the SharePoint Dev Weekly. So it's SharePoint Framework people who were targeting this question. So we've seen the early statistics or the early results, and obviously people are interested. But we are really looking into the scenarios where you would be, or what would you be exposing in Office add-ins, at least in a high level. Because that's going to help Office add-in people in Redmond to figure out that, this is why people would like to do this, rather than not knowing what is the scenarios, business scenarios, what people are trying to achieve. So
I have one feature request, and I think if you find some developers to actually do that, you will have a huge adoption of Office add-ins. So ensure that PowerPoint, Word, Excel, and whatnot can render an adaptive card. That would be super awesome to have a product list and whatnot, just insert that adaptive card and it renders in Excel, PowerPoint, perhaps differently. Then you can reuse that in Teams, in bots, in SharePoint Framework and whatnot.
Yep. Absolutely makes sense. Absolutely. Now, I do not own Office extensibility, and we own the SharePoint Framework. But
hopefully someone's
a separate team.
Someone is listening.
Yes. Or is someone listening? Where? What? Anyway. Okay, so what about the actual articles? So let's jump on the articles, and we'll come back on a random discussion in the end as well. Now, a few things what we wanted to promote first, and let's the SharePoint Saturdays this week. We have Salt Lake City Salt Lake City. Where is it? Where is the Salt Lake City SharePoint Saturday?
In the US.
It is in the US. I think we had this one has a quite long speaker list, so it's again one relatively big SharePoint Saturday. Good to see a lot of MVPs and familiar faces here. David and Alex have been contributing on SharePoint development heavily, and many others as well. So a lot of familiar. Well. Yeah, there are masters here as well. Yeah, Brian Curver. There we go. And a lot of other people here as well. Bu has been really active on SharePoint Framework, yes. On the second SharePoint Saturday is Chennai. Technically, I know that it's in India, but I do not know where exactly is Chennai. This is slightly...
There is a map, right?
Well, there is a map. Okay, fine.
Okay, there.
Fine. Let me zoom out. It is on the East Coast.
How hard can it be?
Okay. It is on the East Coast. Okay, got it. There we go. This is slightly smaller, but there are some familiar MVP faces here as well, like Jenkins and Yazid are people I've been talking at some point.
My friend Sridhar as well.
Yep.
Oh, yep.
And this seems to be really around the development topics as well. So SharePoint Framework, Power Apps, Azure Functions, PMP, and this good set of topics, actually. I might fly by and attend on this one. So, Teams, Microsoft Teams, and yeah, this is really good set of topics. So really, really good stuff. Cool. Bring together SPFX solutions on SharePoint and Microsoft Teams. That's the future of the whole model. Cool. Really cool. Okay, the next thing what I wanted to kind of a few Microsoft owned articles. This one was a really big one, and I wanted to actually get Victor. I know that Victor has been doing plenty of even.coms on SharePoint, like I did used to do. Consultant.
That was a long time ago.
It's been a while. No, but if we concentrate on the modern SharePoint and the branding capabilities of SharePoint, let's go this through first, and then let's talk about where we are from this one. So the mega menus finally getting there. We had an accident back in autumn when this capability was accidentally enabled, but then it was rolled back on the 24 hours. I don't know if you noticed that or remember that. That was just before Ignite. But mega menus are finally coming, and also for the hub site menus. So you're able to basically have a mega menus, and it's an optional thing, optional feature. Updated change to look panel, which basically is then giving you the selection of theme, header, navigation, footer, and from header you're able to then control. Navigation you can control the is it a hub? Is it a mega menu or a classic kind of a menu? But if I scroll down, you can also adjust the layouts in here, the header section, standard compact, set the logo and a bigger logo than in the past if needed. You can set the background colors based on the theming as well, which is pretty cool. And then you have the menus there. You also have the footer for the sites, and the footer supports logo or a text and then static links for now. And you're able to then adjust those visibilities as well. It's pretty cool. When we start, small kind of a bit nuance or maybe a small disappointment, but we'll get there, is that the static footer only works in the modern pages. So if you go to the site contents or a list, this footer is not visible, unfortunately, which is definitely something what we need to have. Now, if you want to have a consistent footer in the list and libraries and site contents and everywhere in your site, you can always use SharePoint Framework extension and implement your footer there. But then it's floating. This footer is in the content. So it's a slightly different experience. And then not the last one. There's plenty of other features coming later, but new site designs panel. So you're able to see which of the site designs have been applied, and you're able to even reapply stuff using the available site designs. So you're able to apply stuff to the site from the UI as well, which is pretty cool. Now, Victor, you as a portal experience, portal master and WCM classic publishing specialist, are we getting there?
Absolutely. I think this is a big step for us at Avanade. A month and a half ago, we released our new intranet, completely built on modern SharePoint with some custom solutions. And one of the feedbacks we got that on the start page, the header is too big. The menu isn't that good in the default. So we knew about these features, but finally we've seen that in our test tenant now, and hopefully within a few weeks we can turn it on in a production tenant as well. So this is a big step forward. And as I said, it's been a big part of the feedback we received. They love everything else, but that big header on the top there, they want that a bit smaller so we get more screen real estate for the actual productivity content that we have. So absolutely, these are big things. The compact header, the mega menu. We also have the alternate shading on the different sections. Is it mentioned in this article?
That was an earlier one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So those are big things. I think footer. Yes, it's a good thing. It's still very limited at this point in time, but the good thing is it's on the bottom of the page and not at the bottom of the screen. So if you want to add that copyright and whatnot or links, I think that's a perfect one. So yeah, these are things we saw them at Ignite and really looking forward. The only feedback I have and is
the only one.
Yeah.
The only one? One?
Yeah, no. Okay. Do you have paper and pen here? No. One thing, actually, and being working too much in PowerPoint and aligning stuff. If you take a look at the header now, I think it's 4 different font sizes, and it's not aligned. If you take a look at the internal only, following, and share, and the actual menu, so it's small things that probably will be fixed in the near future. But this is a big step forward. We are not there when it comes to true enterprise content management, publishing, and all that. But it's not far away. It's not far away now. I think we can do a lot of things and make the pages look really, really nice. And the good thing is it's on Rails. We get it here. Hope people was wanting this to come sooner, but now it's here, and I think you will see big adoption in your telemetry, and people start fiddling with this.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of these one step at a time. We'll absolutely get there, but it's just a matter of prioritizing the tasks, and it's an endless amount of things which we need to improve in the modern. So we'll get there one step at a time. And the next big thing, obviously, for us the branding is a big thing. The modern portals is a massive thing, and then we start adding more and more capabilities on document management and scheduling and all of that stuff as well. So one step at a time. I do have some knowledge of what we're going to announce in the spring event in May, and it's going to be pretty cool. So we just keep on evolving all the time. So I think we're heading to the right direction at least. So
and I think this. Curious. When we have this, it will be so much easier when you actually come in that discussion with the company, and the brand department comes in and say, "Hey, we want this and that," and you could probably fulfill the requirements to 99% now, I would say. Of course, there's some publishing features mentioned that are still lacking, but when it comes to the branding design, if they want to be true modern, work on the SharePoint mobile app, being responsive and all of that, they get everything this for free. If you go to build this in classic site, it will cost you a lot of money and maintenance. You need to buy third-party products and whatnot, but this is what you get for free.
And we're already piloting page layouts in the internal sites and all of that. So it is getting there one step at a time. Now, moving on articles. So thanks for the opinions. Just a quick note on the updated CSOM. So this one was released on last Friday. The Thursday, Friday, whatever. We try to actually put it out in every single last Friday of a month. Before we actually started recording, Victor was like, well, is somebody using CSOM? Which was a joke, obviously. But CSOM is still the most widely used API on SharePoint, even in SharePoint Online. So we need to absolutely keep on evolving that. In this particular release, nothing super dramatical because it's a holiday season, basically, when the stuff was getting checked in. I think we'll have more visible and interesting stuff coming soon. Also, we're working on the .NET Core version of CSOM. So that is in the pipeline for this quarter. We've been promising this for a long time. I'm crossing fingers that resources do not get deprioritized or are prioritized somewhere else. So we'll see. Moving on things about to CSOM. So here's a good article from Stefan. How do you pronounce it? Stefan.
Fun.
This is around how to page through the recycle bin using CSOM. Well, technically, in this case, PowerShell or CSOM together, and how you actually get the information and loaded items one step at a time from the recycle bin if you need to start restoring items or find the right items which you want to restore. Nice article, nice reference if anybody needs to automatically do a restoring of any items from the site collections. So cool stuff. This one was from Elio, using latest SharePoint PnP Core online dependence in your Azure functions. I think yes, CSOM did. Unless I'm mistaken, they're using this in Valo intranet as well. So for their Azure functions, because they're using the PnP templating model there as well as an open source solution. And this relates on the relatively recent Newtonsoft dependency changes, which we were forced to do in the SharePoint Online core CSOM extension related on the, I can't remember which one actually, which caused that. If I would actually ping quickly Bert or Irvin, they can actually explain why did we need to do this. I can't remember anyone. But this basically walks through how do you get that right dependency on the Azure function and how do you make that work properly together with SharePoint PMP core online. So small, nice guidance blog post as well. Good. This one, deploy SPFX app package to SharePoint using Azure DevOps with modern authentication. He's your colleague, Victor Light?
Yes,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And this one is around the legacy auth protocol enabled false true. And if it's actually true, legacy is disabled. And then you need to come up with an alternative ways of authenticating against the SharePoint Online. And he's showing basically here a model where we're using the PMP PowerShell, which is more than just the SharePoint Online and more than just the let's say the CSOM extension, because you can actually operate towards Azure and create the needed certificates and then connect to the SharePoint Online using the Azure authentication and using the certificates. So walking down here, where do we actually have the right scripts? I'm just quickly scanning through. Here we go, connect PMP Online, and we're able to use a client ID and a certificate and a private key to get in. So then you're authenticated through the Azure AD in the context of Office 365, and you're able to then operate in the right level, which is really cool. The article itself concentrates on the DevOps, Azure DevOps, and how do we get stuff deployed to the app catalog. So here's an add a PMP app, and so basically adding the SPPKG file to the app catalog. So
good stuff.
Yeah. Good guidance. Now, moving on, SPFX project structure from Christopher. I'm horrible at this.
Christoforov.
Yes. And this is basically a clarification on how he actually builds his solutions and the structures and how the components are actually sorted out in the if you're using, for example, React in this case. So obviously, whatever is your preference, there are multiple there's no right or wrong or best practices, to be honest, I think on the structures themselves, but it's matter of seeing how people are actually structuring their solutions and then learning from them and finding the right one for you, right? Do you have, Victor, in the Avanade, do you have some sort of a standards related on this?
We have, of course, we have some standards.
Of course I do.
But yes. I'm a little bit, I shouldn't say surprised, but everything we've seen when it comes to these samples and even with the PMP samples and whatnot, they are focusing on building one SharePoint framework solution where everything sits in there. If we think back on how we built solutions with .NET or even before that with COM model, etc., we used to build different kind of assemblies, one with our libraries and one with our user components, React components, etc. And that's how I prefer to build my stuff. So the SharePoint framework solution is essentially just a wrapper for the packaging and the web parts and those kind of things, but then keep the React components in another library so that you can reuse them across different kind of web parts. The same thing with all the utility libraries. So that's something I would like to see more examples of how to do that in an enterprise scenario. This is good when you're building a web part or two, but if you're building, like, say, 10, 20 web parts for multiple clients and those kind of things, you want to reuse up and upgrade them and instead of having to go through everything. And also, if you do that, it's so much easier to do unit testing on your different components if you don't have them in the SharePoint framework context, so to say.
True.
Your thoughts on that?
And obviously the library component type, which would be you were the one who wanted to have that one already.
No, it was me. I wanted to have it.
Oh, it was you. Okay, so anyway,
or two of us.
So the library component support for third party is in the pipeline, I think, for 1.8 or 1.9. So it potentially is already in 1.8. Depends really on how Landis will spend his time. He's one of the engineers working on that one as well. So Landis, you're on point on that. So,
dear Landis.
Exactly.
But all of that makes it so instead of having that big bundle, the library component will make it easier for you to create both an extensible way of building your components, but also minimize the payload. Just load the stuff when you actually need it.
But also once on the page, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Bundle that Office UI Fabric once, and that's why we built out our library or NPM packages. Actually, they will host an internal Azure DevOps instance, so we download our own internal NPM packages with React components. And with the library component, then we only have one Office UI Fabric, and we can reuse those components, which is that's going to affect performance a lot. So I think that's super good.
Yep. One step at a time. We'll get there. Yeah. Now, moving on articles, how to check permissions from current user. We were scanning this article through, and all of us were like, how is it actually happening? But so this one, the most important part here is that we're actually having the permissions in the base context web permissions property, and then we can actually do, if we use that one, we can do permissions has permissions. The certain things, so you can actually double check is the user having the right permission, and then enabling or disabling capabilities around the web part or an extension. So it makes a lot of sense. Good blog post from Christopher. Oh, there we go. Yes, 2 articles, 2 of 2. Then from Anup Tati around applying our out-of-the-box modern themes via REST API, out-of-the-box modern themes. Well, you can actually apply custom themes using the same pattern as well.
Yeah.
But in here, really is around the apply theme endpoint. Where do we actually have it?
Up.
Oh, there we go. Apply theme endpoint, and then having the right formalized JSON string there, which is then basically saying what are the colors and what are the color codes for the theming. You can actually apply a custom theme without assigning a custom theme in a tenant level as well to the site using this method, which is pretty cool. Nice. So you're able to have a completely custom dedicated theme for that particular site, which is really good. So.
And the corporate brand teams really love that when they define that 3 themes to be used over the whole tenant.
Fair point. Yeah. Again, there's advantages and disadvantages in both sides. So.
With great flexibility comes great costs.
Yeah. And the last one is around the online multilingual modern sites, real case pros and cons. And this is from Luis, kind of considering the different options. And we used to have a variation feature in SharePoint Online. Technically, it's still there, but it's not supported for modern. It's for classic purposing. And I would never, ever would have recommended variation as the multilingual approach, even in classic, even in like 5 years ago. I never considered that as the translation engine, because it wasn't really that flexible, because it's basically a hierarchical copy. You can't isolate which of the content is getting translated. And if you have, let's say, 20 languages of your portal across the world, it's not like you have 20 people, or it's the costs of translating your content to 20 languages is just insanely expensive.
Well, but on the other hand, if you choose to have the same portal in 20 languages, why would you be not inclusive of people and say like, this, I mean, sure, there might be things that are local and do not apply to you if you are in different location. But if there's things like announcement, a company-wide announcement.
Yeah, but also it's so much more than actually translating text and those kind of things. I built the .com site. It's many years ago now, but they wanted to have the same site all globally, all over the world. It was a big consumer goods company. Yep. And they launched it worldwide, South America, North America, Europe, Asia, the same site, just the text translated. But they got really negative feedback from the other regions in Europe, because the imagery, the text, the way it looks, the design, etc., did not match with those cultures. So it's so much more than the actual text and images. It's in the messaging. So sometimes you actually need to build completely different sites. And we're talking about variations. I still have nightmares about those labs at the MCM.
Oh, the MCM labs of variation. Those were fun. So yeah, I stopped sharing, by the way. So that's a good reference and a real world use cases, which is having pros and cons. But I will put it on the blog post as well. I know that Waldek has to stop. Has a hard stop in 2 minutes. So any last words and learnings and conclusions out of this week?
It's snowing.
It is.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
In Amsterdam?
Yes, it is. It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, not in Amsterdam, in Netherlands, but anyway.
Yes. No, I mean it was fun talking to you, Victor. Seeing you again, and let's stay in touch. And looking forward to hear more about feedback and take on portals and teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see each other in Red
at the summit.
Yes, we'll do.
Yeah, MVP Summit is coming. I'm going to break my CO2 recommendations when I'm flying over there. So
do it in person recording then.
If you're an MVP and joining on the MVP Summit, we do have an extra SharePoint Dev Kitchen, but only for MVPs. We do apologize on Thursday. So on the day after the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are the typical days. So I think we've been doing this for SharePoint now for 5 to 6 years already, and we keep on always having at least one extra day for everybody. There's always something to talk about. SharePoint has the most active community by far on the dev side, and sure, now we are expanding towards the Microsoft 365 and all of that, but it's great chance to have discussions with the MVPs. But I think that's it for now. So thank you, Victor. Thank you, Waldek, and we'll come up with a new SP Dev Weekly in a week, right?
Next week, yeah. All right, see ya.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.